Welcome to Tees Voices, telling the stories of the people in our NHS community.
In the studios today, we've got Jim and Matt, who's come to talk to us about the Swartz rounds. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
A couple of things. Obviously, can you tell us about the Swartz rounds and what exactly are they, Jim?
Yeah, it's a funny old name, isn't it? Swartz rounds. It's all due to a guy called Ken Swartz in 1994. He was in the States and he was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. And during his treatment, he found that what mattered most to him as a patient was the simple acts of kindness from his caregivers. He's quoted as saying, "This made the unbearable bearable." And just before his death, he left a legacy for the establishment of the Swartz Centre in Boston to help foster compassion in healthcare. This is a quote that he left behind. "I've learned that medicine is not merely about performing tests or surgeries or administering drugs. For as skilled and as knowledgeable as my caregivers are, what matters most is that they have empathised with me in a way that gives me hope and makes me feel like a human being, not just an illness." So Swartz Rounds came out of that legacy to foster compassion in healthcare, and they provide a structured forum where all staff, clinical and non-clinical, can come together regularly and discuss the emotional and social aspects of working in healthcare. So the purpose of the rounds is to understand the challenges and rewards involved in providing care. It's not to solve problems or to focus on the clinical aspects of patient care, but the rounds can help staff feel more supported in their jobs, allowing them time and space to reflect on their roles. And actually, evidence shows that staff who attend rounds can feel less stressed and isolated. And they give an increased insight and appreciation of each other's roles. They also help reduce hierarchies between staff and to focus attention on relational aspects of care. So the underlying premise for Swartz Rounds is that the compassion shown by staff can make all the difference to a patient experience of care. But in order to provide compassionate care, staff must in turn feel supported in their work. So Swartz Rounds are that safe, confidential space where stories can be shared, stories can be heard, people can resonate with these stories and reflect on these stories. So it's not about problem solving, it's not about finding solutions, it's not about debriefing or supervision, it's just about providing that space for emotional resonance and empathy.
How does somebody get involved with the Swartz rounds?
So it's just turning up whenever there's a Swartz round. You just listen to the stories and you can be involved that way.
What sort of themes have you covered so far?
Well, sort of a whole range of themes. So some great Swartz rounds that we had last year was The Great Pretender, where we talked about the issue of imposter syndrome. Diane Matters Week last year, we had a look at Wish You Were Here and some stories coming out of that sort of theme. But we've talked about Don't Give Up, Perseverance, You've Got a Friend in Me, Friendship and Kindness. A Letter to Myself was a very, very powerful Swartz round, and that was just personal reflections on staff members writing a letter to their younger self. On the 27th of March at North Tees, we've got This Is Me, and looking at issues of what's it like to be touched by neurodiversity, working in the trust.
Question to Matt. As a speaker, obviously coming up to the Swartz rounds, how did you get involved and take part in it?
So I think my very first Swartz round that I attended was actually 5 years ago, almost to the day really, and it was around an LGBTQ themed Swartz round. And for me, I had just come out as transgender in the November before, so I attended this Swartz round as a bit like a sort of introduction to the community, and that was the very first time that I'd been, and it was the very first time I had spoken in public really outside my sort of workplace and home about being transgender. And obviously it was so nerve-wracking at the time, but I just stuck my hand up and sort of contributed to this discussion, and I've never looked back since. I think that actually was a very pivotal role in my personal life, of being able to feel like I've got a voice and I can make a difference with that voice, and having that confidence to talk about my personal experiences. So then I went on to actually being a panelist a couple of years ago. I've been a panelist twice now, and I'm going to be a panelist in the upcoming one in March. This Is Me, about neurodiversity. And for me, being a speaker, or even just attending and contributing the conversation, it's just massively beneficial. For a start, it's like quite cathartic when you sort of putting together your kind of story with the help of the Schwarzraum facilitators, who were a massive help. That was actually how I met Jim in the first place. He was the facilitator the first time I spoke at a Schwarzraum. And that relationship is sort of having that support of like, this is my story, and getting that feedback and working with people to sort of hone it and sort of explore it more. I've found like that process of looking at that story, even though you know it, telling it to somebody else makes you look at it in a different light, and exploring your emotions and your feelings and all of that thing around it in a different way. The first one that I did, that sort of process of going through my story, writing this story, is that I'd sort of getting my diagnosis of being autistic and having ADHD, figuring out about being trans. I'd gone through that process, and then at the end I was like, I love myself as I am, and I'm going to be me no matter what, and all of this. And I wrote that thinking that that's how I felt. But as I was writing it and speaking to Jim and Elaine at the time, and sort of going through these iterations, I sort of realised actually, I wasn't okay, and sort of it helped me process those feelings and sort of be more honest, like both with myself and then to the people at the Schwarzraum. So I found it really helpful for me. And I think people can be sort of nervous about sharing, sometimes quite personal situations and emotions. But once you start talking and once you finish talking, it's all positive, I think. And I think the nerves are worth it in the end. So I'd definitely encourage anybody, even thinking about it, I'd definitely say give it a go.
I mean, the last question, you probably covered this. How do staff actually benefit from the Schwarzraums? As
a speaker, there is obvious benefits at being as a speaker, but I think just attending a Schwarzraum, so I've started attending them regularly. I think even at first, I sort of looked at the themes and thought, actually, that doesn't really apply to me, so I wouldn't go along. Being a non-clinical staff, I thought it's mostly about, supporting clinical staff and sort of that thing. But as I started going to them more, even if I didn't think it was particularly relevant to me, you learn a lot about your colleagues. Like I think Jim was saying earlier, it's breaking down those barriers that you may be in this sort of like hierarchical world. Like you see people, like we have speakers there from like executive levels, consultants, surgeons, to clerical staff. We have them at all levels, and it's not about your job or what banding you are, it's about a person, and it really helps you to see people as a person, like with lives outside of work. You see them outside of their job role.
Absolutely, it's great to hear Matt share from his point of view, but I would absolutely agree. One of my greatest joys at the end of a Schwarzraum is to hear people as they leave and say things like, I thought I was the only one that felt that way. And it's this, the whole point of Schwarzraums are to be mechanisms spaces for emotional resonance, for that emotional connection to be tangible between colleagues. It's easy for work pressures to make us feel isolated and alone, as if we're the only ones that are struggling with certain situations, or struggling with our role, or with our work, or whatever's going on. And Schwarzraums can help break down those walls that seek to isolate us. And I'm not the only one that is struggling with this. And as Matt it says, sort of, someone can be in a completely different role, in a completely different banding, but they're facing the same struggles that we're facing, and suddenly we're not isolated, we're just part of a wider team. And I'm always amazed that these stories that people share can be so different, and they approach a subject from very different angles, as we would do, because we're all individuals, we're all personal, we all see things our own way. And yet there's a thread that sort of links each of the stories more often than not, and it's just fantastic to be there at the end, especially when people have attended perhaps for the first time and go, oh my goodness, that was really, really interesting. Talking about if people want to get involved, we're always looking for new speakers. Contact myself or anyone part of the Schwartz team will be able to help guide you there.
I think it's important to sort of remind people, because it is like about professional development, obviously personal development and the professional development, so it's sort of worth reminding people that attending the Schwartz round, either as a panellist or as just attending the Schwartz round, is protected time and does count towards your continued professional development. Yep. So if managers can release them, it's massively beneficial, not just that person, but for the whole team as well. I think, you know, the benefits are really big for everybody, just attendance. So,
well, Matt, Jim, thank you for coming into the studios and telling us about the Schwartz round. Thank you very much,
brilliant.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Till next time, you've been listening to Tees Voices.